This is the Galaxy S9 Plus and this is the Galaxy Note 8. And both of these are the flagship phones from Samsung right now. And I want to find out which of these is the best buy. So what I'm going to be doing is 5 different tests to find out which of these phones is better and which one you should buy. So the first test is going to be physical aspects. Second is going to be software experience. Third is going to be the sound experience. Fourth will be your specifications and benchmarks. And fifth and the final one will be camera comparison. So without wasting any time, let's get right into it. So let's start off looking at the physical features of both of these phones, and they're actually very similar to each other. They're the same Samsung design trend, front and back glass both being curved, aluminum frames around the chassis, and generally they just have a very clean look. Both of them have the dual camera setup, similar cameras, only the primary camera has a little bit of a difference here with the variable aperture on the S9 Plus. Fingerprint sensor, obviously it's moved. Now the screen sizes, the interesting part is that the screen sizes are actually very similar to each other. This is 6.2 inches, this is 6.3 inches. However, the thing with the Note 8 is that the Note 8 has a much less pronounced curve on the edges here, which makes the screen feel a lot bigger. And it actually gives you a lot more space to work on your phone. It feels like the screen is bigger. The S9, it has more of a pronounced curve around the edges. Now, I personally like this more than the Note 8 because the grip is just a lot better and the edges don't feel as squared off. However, it comes down to personal preference there, and both of them are actually pretty good. Physically, otherwise, the phones are very similar. You've got the headphone jack, USB-C, and speaker grill at the bottom. You do have the S Pen on the Note 8, which is one of the bigger deals here. So the S Pen is definitely a primary feature here on the Note 8. Whereas down here on the S9, same thing, headphone, USB-C, and a speaker grill. The S9 does have dual speakers, so the earpiece up top acts as the second speaker. Definitely a good and welcome addition. Both of them, again, have the notification light up here. And overall, very similar, the buttons, the layout, and everything else. So physically, not too much to differentiate the phones. The only thing that's really different is the way that the curve is designed here. So on the Note 8, it feels a lot more squared off. The S9 is a lot more rounded. If you're going to be using the phone one-handed, I feel like the S9 is going to be a little bit more comfortable. The Note 8 obviously has the awesome S Pen, so the S Pen can definitely be used for people who are looking to be a little bit more productive. Elsewise, it's fairly the same. So let's move on and look at the software changes. So again, moving into the software, there's not too much to differentiate these phones. They are running Samsung Experience on both of them, the same version. Both are on Android 8.0 now. The key thing with the Note 8 is obviously the S Pen. You get these S Pen features right here, which are really helpful if you're going to be using the S Pen. Bixby Vision is a little bit different on both of these devices. The S9 has a few new features here. Another thing with this is that you have the Smart Scan, so it uses a combination of facial and iris scanning to unlock the phone, which this doesn't use. Even though it does have the same sensors, the S9 Plus software allows you to use a combination of both to unlock the device. Otherwise, the only other difference I remember is that the S9 Plus has AR emojis. Otherwise, everything else is the same. You get the same edges panel. All those things are very similar to each other. So software-wise speaking, it all comes down to whether you need that S Pen or not. If you don't really need the S Pen, the S9 Plus has almost everything else. In fact, it has a few more features sprinkled here and there in comparison to the Note 8. But if you need that S Pen, there's really no arguing which one of these is the better software experience. So when it comes down to it, that's the deciding factor. Let's move on. So let's talk about the specs of these phones. So starting off, the display sizes on both these phones is 6.3 for the Galaxy Note 8 and 6.2 for the S9 Plus. And the S9 Plus coming in at 189 grams. So let's look at some benchmarks here, and this is where it gets interesting. In a previous video where I compared the features of these two phones, people kept saying that the Note 8 was better, just better because it has the S Pen. And I disagree. So the S Pen is definitely an important physical feature of the Note 8, but the fact that the S9 Plus is cheaper and it has better specifications kind of shows right through when you look at benchmarks. And as I've always said, benchmarks aren't the best way to compare a phone, but they're a good way of just seeing where they stack up against each other. In real-world performance, you really don't see too much of a difference, but I'm sure as time goes on, as more software updates come out, there will be more of a difference than what you see there to be today. So the Note 8 has a Antutu benchmark score of 204,796,000. The S9 Plus has a 254,978 score. Now, to be very honest with you guys, I didn't expect this much of a gap between the two, considering the fact that they were only launched like 6 months apart. But the new processors are definitely, they're doing a lot of work here, and they do improve quite a bit when it comes to benchmarks. And the same thing follows through for Geekbench. The Geekbench scores on the Note 8 are 2,004 for single core and 6,760 for multi-core. The S9 Plus has 3,790 on single core and 9,064 on multi-core. So it's very clear that while the phones may be very similar, the specifications of benchmarks do show a different story. Now, in real-world usage, I will be very honest with you guys, I don't notice a difference right now. There is no real difference. Apps load just the same, maybe under heavy, intensive gaming or video exports or something like that, I would notice a difference. But in day-to-day use, I haven't noticed a difference. Now, looking at the speed test, now this is the interesting part here where the Note 8, I didn't really think there would be too much of a difference between the speeds, but there is quite a difference when it comes to both upload and download. The download speeds on the S9 Plus are consistently 10 MB more than the Mbps more than the Note 8. Downloads are there's an even bigger gulf with most downloads. So I ran 3 tests. One of them, the last one, wasn't so consistent, but the first 2 were .94. Same here with the Note 8. So there's a 30 Mbps gap there with upload. So definitely there's some networking improvements going on there with the Wi-Fi chipset. So when it's coming down to it, I think that the S9 Plus has the better specifications here, and really it is the better performer of these two phones. Looking at the first photo, what you can see right off the bat is that the colors on the S9 Plus are a lot darker than they are on the Note 8, as well as some details on the tree are a lot more noticeable on the S9 Plus than they are on the Note 8. In this next photo, with a lot of sunlight coming in through the lens, you can see that both do a fairly decent job of trying to keep the exposure right, and both of them I think are tied here in terms of keeping details and exposure to a correct level. In this photo, what we can see is that the S9 Plus does a much better job handling exposure than the Note 8 did. The Note 8 has a lot of very bright and whited out spots, whereas the S9 Plus doesn't have that. The colors on the S9 Plus are a lot more vibrant as well in comparison to the Note 8. So this one I feel like the S9 Plus did a lot better job of handling. Here's an image with live focus on both, and I have to say both of the cameras did an excellent job. It's hard to pick which one did a better job, but personally when you zoom into the photos, I felt like the Note 8 had a little bit more detail in the flower in comparison to the S9 Plus, but when you pull back, the overall details on the S9 Plus look a lot better, so this one goes to the S9 Plus as well. In this picture, it is a flat outside in my opinion. Both do a perfect job of keeping colors very real to life, and the exposure is just perfect, and the background is very well handled in terms of not being blurred out too much, but having the perfect bokeh effect without that live focus. Here's a photo from the front-facing camera of both of these phones, and they both look almost identical, and that's pretty much obvious because they have the same sensor to work with. and they look really good. Neither of them do the world's best job handling exposure in the back. The sky is just completely white. Note S9 Plus has a little bit better handling on the top with the blue, but overall, a little bit more could be done in terms of that exposure. The one feature the S9 Plus does have while having the same camera is that live focus. So there is a live focus option on the S9 Plus, which basically blurs out the background to add a bokeh effect, but it doesn't do too great of a job. If you notice carefully, on the right side of my face, my hair gets cut off by the software blur, and similar things start to happen near the left side as well. Overall, it does a decent job, but it comes nowhere close to the Pixel. This is a two-part photo. This photo was taken with both 1x and 2x zoom. This is the first one with the 1x zoom. Both the phones handled it very well. The color details and exposure are just perfect, and overall, I think that's an absolute tie between these two photos. And looking at the 2x zoom now, the details on the S9 Plus just look a little bit sharper in comparison to the Note 8. The Note 8 doesn't do a bad job at all, but the S9 Plus, in my opinion, it captures those details a little bit better in terms of the iPhone's color being a little bit more visible and the text being a little bit less noisy. Looking at a final low-light image. So I took a lot of low-light images to compare, and the Note 8 surprisingly does very well, considering that the S9 Plus has that dual aperture that helps it work very well in low light. But the Note 8 is not that far behind. Definitely one of the best low-light camera sensors out there between the S9 Plus and Note 8. But definitely the S9 Plus has a lot nicer photos in comparison to the Note 8. Alright everybody, so this is the comparison of the Galaxy Note 8 on the left and the Galaxy S9 Plus on the right. The S9 Plus is on 4K 60 FPS. The Note 8 is on 4K 30 FPS, which is the highest setting. Now, tell me what you guys think about it. On the preview, the Note 8 just looks a lot more choppy. But that might just be because it's not processing fast enough. But overall, let me know how you guys think it turned out. Alright guys, so this is the front camera test of the Galaxy Note 8 and S9 Plus. The Note 8 is on the left, S9 Plus is on the right. And both of them look to be very similar, and that's not surprising because both of them do have the same front camera. So let me know what the audio and everything is like. What is the color like? So I'm just gonna, twirl it around a little bit. Let me know what you guys think. Alright guys, so this is the Galaxy Note 8 and S9 Plus indoor video test. So the S9 Plus is on the right, Note 8 is on the left, and the S9 Plus is running 4K 60 FPS, the Note 8 is on 4K 30 FPS. Let me know what you guys think about the quality. I'm just gonna move around over here to show you guys everything. This is fairly low light, so let me know what the results are like for you and which one you think is better. Alright guys, so this is the indoor low light test for the Galaxy Note 8 and S9 Plus. So the S9 Plus is on the right, Note 8 is on the left, and I think both of them look very similar, and that doesn't surprise me because they're both very similar devices and cameras. So let me know what you guys think. So that wraps up all the tests, and looking at the first part of the comparison was physical. So physically, both of these phones are very, very equivalent, but the Note 8 will win out here just because the fact that the Note 8 has that S Pen and it does boost functionality. Otherwise, physically, both of the phones are very similar. They're similar in size and everything else. So moving on, we look at software experience. Now this is again something that is very different in my opinion and very same at the same time. The only key difference is, and that's something that's really big, is the Galaxy Note 8's S Pen. So the S Pen has those S Pen's features such as the screen off writing capabilities and stuff like that. Otherwise, very similar. Bixby Vision has a few improvements on the S9 Plus. There's AR emojis, but when it comes down to it, I think software-wise, it's very close to give it a tie, but I'll give it to the Note 8, again, just simply because of that S Pen and those S Pen functionalities. Moving on, number 3, the speakers. Now, this is where everything starts changing for the Note 8. So the Note 8 does not have a dual firing speaker like the S9 does. So the S9 has a bottom facing and a front facing with that earpiece doubling up as a speaker. Obviously, double speakers are going to improve the sound quality a lot more, and the phone is just a lot louder. It has a lot better bass, and everything overall on the whole is a lot nicer when it comes to sound on the S9 Plus. So the S9 Plus takes this round. The fourth part, which is specifications. Now, people have told me in previous videos that the Note 8 doesn't matter speed-wise; it's all the same. Not the case. So while the phones seem to be very similar in usage, so real world usage, fairly similar, you really can't tell the difference now. The Note 8, the S9 Plus has much better benchmarks. It does a lot better on benchmark. It has the newest Snapdragon processor, Exynos, whichever region you're in. And overall, it's just a much nicer phone in terms of CPU and all the technologies behind it. Not to mention it has that camera update as well, with the camera being a more sophisticated unit. But the difference isn't too big here. Still, the S9 Plus, the clear winner. And moving on to the final fifth facet of the comparison, that is camera. So now I'll be honest with you guys. Originally, I thought the camera would be quite a big difference. The S9 is just going to blow the Note 8 out. But the Note 8 actually held its own really well here. And a lot of the times I was just fighting between the fact that the Note 8 just has such good photos. The S9 Plus, even in low light, is not too far off from the Note 8. While the S9 Plus has that much needed dual aperture lens, the single aperture on the Note 8 does really well too. So in the photo comparisons, I was really surprised to see that they weren't performing too differently from each other. I took so many low light photos just because I was completely confused. And the results aren't too far off. So it's a lot of Samsung marketing going there for that dual camera lens, but it's just as good on this. However, in a lot of situations, the S9's camera does beat it out, plus the fact that on video recording, it has 4K 60 FPS and that slow-mo mode with the 960 frames per second. So I think that this one goes to the S9 Plus as well. So that wraps up all the 5 facets, and if you guys have been keeping count, the S9 Plus has gotten 3 out of 5. So the S9 Plus is the clear winner. And a personal fact right here that I didn't mention in the test is that the S9 Plus is actually $100 cheaper, or $200 cheaper in some cases, from the Note 8. So the Note 8 starts off at $1,000, and the S9 starts at $849 if I'm not wrong, or $839. Somewhere there, the S9 Plus is about $150 cheaper. So this phone is cheaper and it performs just as well. So if anybody was in the market for a phone right now between the Note 8 and S9 Plus, the S9 would be my recommendation unless you really want that S Pen. The S Pen does carry a lot of features with it, but I personally feel like most users would not miss it too much. So there is that fan base, there is that market where the stylus is very useful, but for most people, I think that saving the $150 and having more features such as the dual aperture camera and the dual speakers, that kind of makes up for it a lot more. So that's what I think about this, and let me know what you guys think about these two. Which one would you choose if it was your money on the line? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you have any questions, be sure to hit me up on social media or down in the comments below. I have all the information in the description. And if you haven't already, guys, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with the latest videos coming out on the S9 and the Note 8. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.